Hi everyone, my name is Filipe Clemente, and today we will talk about using data to build small-sided games. In this small presentation, we will share some thoughts about using data coming from different tests and instruments that will allow us to make better decisions and to fit to our athletes. First of all, I'd like to thank the opportunity for being here and present this for Football Connection. This is an amazing project, and I'm glad to be part of this project. So, our aim for this small presentation, that will be around 15 minutes, is to build something about making decisions as coaches. And usually, the decision for using this or other tasks are not always based on the information based rationale, but I think that sometimes we need to get insights through literature or through our data and make better decisions about what type of format, what type of drill can we implement in a given point of our training context. It's also important to mention that I will bring some examples, but ultimately the decision is context dependent. So sometimes we have very beautiful examples, but in our scenarios, these examples may not be the most appropriate ones. So I will bring some examples just to explore the idea, but as you can imagine, the ultimate decision must be gauged through synchronization of different aspects, namely context, moment of the season, capacity of our players, current status, trainability. Many aspects makes the difference when we should implement a given training exercise. During this presentation, I will focus on my area of expertise, the small-sided games. That is a very popular training drill used in soccer training scenarios. But this can be expanded for other contexts as well. So, when we start thinking about which exercise we must apply to our players, we have always some thoughts in mind, and we always try to fit the exercise or the drill to our training objectives, but ultimately we want to achieve a given performance by our players. We know that among many players we may have a great heterogeneity. This is part of the process. So that's why it's so important to monitor and control our athletes, trying to fit the exercise to them. But even within each exercise, we can have heterogeneity between players, but also variability within players for the same exercise in different moments. So, based on that, we need to balance and to identify which exercise we should apply to ensure that we are trying to fill out the gaps in our team and be aligned with the needs of our players. So, first of all, when we thinking to build up our training plan and select our training exercises, we start thinking, okay, what type of task constraints we will use to achieve our main objectives. And based on our objectives for the task and for the training session, we start to thinking in how to achieve these objectives through manipulation of task constraints. So we start thinking, okay, we have these task objectives, so let's build up the training exercise starting from the typology of the exercise, and also the training regimen that we will build. So after building the exercise, we will naturally have an immediate response from our players in the external level. This external level can be understood as the external load that is built through the interaction of the tactical behavior. I mean, when we build our drill and the player starts playing our drill, they will try to be fit in dynamic of exercise. So this is the tactical behavior that will modulate and shape the requirements to achieve these dynamics. That is the physical component of exercise. So we are talking about external load, total distance covered, sprints, accelerations, mechanical load, and so on. This is part of the needs to achieve the tactical behavior that players need to show during the exercise. And then, based on these external loads, we may have different internal load stimulus, and the internal load in this case are the responses from body regarding physiological responses, immunological responses, and so on, endocrine. So we can have different heart rates for the same total distance in two different players. We may have two different blood lactate levels for the same external load, or we may have different perceptions of the effort for the same external load. So it's actually the internal load that will impact, hopefully, the adaptations over the period of the stimulus during a given period of exercise. So I mean, when we start working with our players and if we want to achieve a given adaptation, we expect that with 12 weeks, 2 times a week of a given internal load, we do expect to have a given improvement in a given capacity, like aerobic capacity or so on. So these adaptations are related with the level of stimulus and the type of stimulus that we apply. So that's why it's so important try to fix and fit the load to the players, and then to hope to get a given adaptation. In the aim of or in the scope of training process in football, naturally as coaches we need to adjust and select given drills. So if we choose to use small sided games as a training tool for some of the drills, we are trying to implement these drills aiming to get advantage of the three interaction elements: task constraints, that are the tasks that we can manipulate, so the number of players involved, the shape of the shape and the size of the field, number of touches in the ball, task objectives, and so on. And these task constraints that I can manipulate, they interact with environment. I mean, relative humidity, temperature, the type of grass, and so on, and also the organism's constraints, like biological status of the players, polymorphism, trainability, and so on. And these three main constraints, they interact between each other to then get a given performance in a cycle of perception and action during the drill. So that's why when we choose to move on for more ecological based drills, we need to be aware that heterogeneity may occur, even because we are exposed to this heterogeneity in organisms and the interaction of organism with task constraints. So the final output, the performance, is highly contextualized to the scenario and also to each player that is being involved. That's why monitoring the process is very important, to adjust the task to the player's needs and to be sure that our proposal is being within our objectives. So as coach, we can manipulate different task constraints. You can see here in the figure task objectives. We can have ball possession, crossing lines, small balls, regular goals. In the type of format, we can have small sided games, medium sided games, large sided games, in a balanced way, in unbalanced way. So we can also have pitch configuration with the small dimension, large dimension, dimensions more in goal to goal or sideline to sideline. So all these elements interact to explain the ultimate performance of players, and it's also important to explain that this interaction makes a lot of difference based on this task constraint manipulation. Examples: smaller number of players, like 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2 in heart rate, may achieve 90 or more % of maximal heart rate during this exercise. However, if we want to decrease the intensity, the number of players must be like 5 versus 5 or 6 versus 6. In that scenario, we will have like 85% of maximal heart rate intensity during exercise. This is just a small example. Other example, if you have very small field dimensions, probably you will have more numbers of acceleration in deceleration, change of directions, but you will not have too many high-speed running or sprinting. If we want to produce or to expose our players to more running demands, we need to increase the size of the field for achieving high-speed running and sprinting more often. So the way that how we manage task constraints are very important to explain the ultimate performance of our players, and that's why it's so important to be aware of the information and the data that comes from our monitoring systems to be sure that we are achieving the ultimate goal for our players. So this is a small example is very famous in the literature. So we can see here the 4 versus 4, 6 versus 6, 8 versus 8, and the 10 versus 10 sided games. And in these graphs, we can see that probably 4 versus 4 and 6 versus 6 will be more metabolic demanding, and the stage in VO2 max will be higher than when we implement 8 versus 8 or 10 versus 10, and also the anaerobic contribution will be higher and more taxed in these small formats. However, we can also observe here that for running demands as high-speed running, these smaller formats are not so interesting for accumulating meters in this type of demands. So That's why we should implement 8 versus 8 or 10 versus 10, because the field allows players to run more and achieve the speed that they need in a given time. However, if we want to accumulate acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, eventually the mechanical work will be higher, and these small formats of 4 versus 4 and 6 versus 6, even because in these formats the field dimension will be also small. This is another example, very interesting, because in this study, Lacombe et al. Have provided comparisons between 4 versus 4, 6 versus 6, 8 versus 8, and 10 versus 10 in situations of ball possession and regular goal. And in this gray shadow, you can see the confidence intervals for the typical running distance per minute in official matches. And what we can see is that actually only in situations of regular goal, only the 10 versus 10 exercise allow players to be in the confidence intervals expected for the game. The 4 versus 4, 6 versus 6, and 8 versus 8 will be smaller in terms of demands for high speed distance in total distance. However, in 4 versus 4, the mechanical work will be more demanding than in regular match, as you can see here in these points. So the main message here is that when we select specific task constraints, we are shaping differently the demands that our players will have, and this is quite important for providing a correct stimulus to our players. The state of the art allows us to say that if we want intensifying stimulus in our players and the stimulus in interload, we should not use goalkeepers. We should keep smaller formats, bigger fields, limited ball touches, providing encouragement during the exercise, and also provide intermittent stimulus to ensure that players become or be stable in the same intensity. So this is the state of the art that we can bring from different original studies, and based on that we can build up our drills. Regarding the technical aspects, we can also identify here some patterns that we can see in the state of the art. If we want to increase the number of individual actions in our players without losing the opportunity to maintain the similar accuracy in between formats, we should use small formats like 2 versus 2 to 4 versus 4. If we want to increase also number of technical actions, we should not use goalkeepers. If we want to increase the number of technical actions per player, we should use smaller formats. However, if we want that our team as a team maintain more the possession of the ball, we should use larger formats. And between repetitions, if we want to ensure accuracy in between repetitions over a given drill, we should increase the recovery and ensure that players are allowed to full recovered in between repetitions to be fully available to be accurate in technical aspects. So this is an example how to build our exercise. So if we want to provide a given stimulus for heart rate, imagine that our ultimate goal is providing a high intensity stimulus for heart rate to tax aerobic power as a training goal. So we should use smaller formats like 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, and 3 versus 3. In a medium size like 75 meters square per player. And then we should not use goals, regular goals. We should use small goals or ball possession to increase the opportunity to maintain the possession of the ball and to be in game, and to avoid too many shoots on goal that will reduce the intensity. And we should use man-to-man marking, because also increase the participation of each player and increase the intensity of exercise, and also limiting ball touches in our players to make them run more, to create opportunities to receive, to pass, and so on. However, if we want, imagine that the target for our exercise is to achieve a good volume of high-speed running. In that cases, these scenarios, we should opt for large-sided games like 7 versus 7 or 8 versus 8 in large fields that allow players to have 120 or 150 meters square per player. In this case, using goals will allow players to achieve more often the running demands for the task. Providing free touches and zone marking allow players to explore the spacing between defensive lines. So this is our two examples how to build up our exercises based on the data and information that we have about typical responses of players during exercises. So we can have here two examples for the same players, 2 versus 2 versus 4 versus 4. And we can see that the difference in between 2 versus 2 and 4 versus 4 are verified. You can see total distance about 150 meters a minute in 2 versus 2. However, in 4 versus 4 is about 180 meters a minute. So greater number of players will allow players to cover more distance, even because the space will increase, even if it's standardized to the same area per player. However, if the number of players increase, the size of the pitch will also increase and allow players to run more. Also, the intensity in high-speed running will be higher. However, as you can see in 2 versus 2, the typical heart rate max will be 90%, and in 4 versus 4 will be 86%. In case of accuracy in passes will be similar, and also in shoots we will decrease in 4 versus 4. It's normal because it will be more difficult to achieve the goal in this context. So this is a brief example how to use data and information to build our exercises and to choose the specific drills for our objectives. It was a great pleasure be part of Football Connection, and if you have any question you can reach me by email, and thank you so much.